Hello and welcome to another fabulous edition of Pittsburgh Sports Memories. Today we will be reminiscing about the good old days. We're going to set the time machine back to 2002, 2003, see what was going on. George Bush was president. 9/11 was still fresh in our memories, unfortunately. And Pitt basketball had all of a sudden become relevant on the national stage. Who knew? New, but the wonderful days and high heady days of Ben Howland and Brandon Knight. So we're going to go through probably their most successful season of that early rendition of the Pitt Panthers. Just to do some background on Pitt basketball, Pitt basketball has never won a basketball national championship. Their only Final Four appearance is in 1941, and I think I looked it up. That tournament was only had like 8 teams or 16. It wasn't like a big deal like it is now. Pitt had made the Elite Eight in 1974. They had some successful teams with Charles Evans and Jerome Lane in the late 80s. Pitt is at this time where the team is I call this the Big East Classic lineup. Although people might disagree with me, but from a Pitt perspective, it's the Big East Classic lineup, and that was with Miami, Virginia Tech, Rutgers, and Boston College. They're still there, although I think this might have been their last year. Correct? Yeah, I think in 2004 they did leave. Um, Also, in the conferences, Syracuse and UConn, and Georgetown, Villanova, Seton Hall, and St. John's. Obviously, Georgetown, Villanova, Seton Hall, and St. John's are the basketball only schools, the original Big East members. UConn was kind of a newcomer to football. They had some success, and although they've kind of slid backwards since then. And Syracuse, of course, has been playing Pitt forever and ever. Amen. In all the sports. Notre Dame. This is Notre Dame hangs out in the Big East. They just kind of hang out. They're that cool kid that's too cool for the rest of the Big East. Like, suck it, losers. We're gonna play whoever we want in football and hang out with you guys in basketball. So, and like all the Olympic sports, like women's gymnastics and all that fun stuff. But anyway, I guess the Big East was just happy to have them. WVU and Pitt are there, of course, but neither has had too much success in basketball in the conference since joining, which is a shame because WVU had a really successful basketball program with Jerry West and such before that. The logo, as they call him, since the logo of the NBA is based on Jerry West. So in 1999, Pitt fires their head coach, who was Ralph Willard. The team had only made one NIT appearance under Willard and had not been to the NCAA tournament since 1993, and that was under the previous coach, Paul Evans, I believe. So in that same year, 99, since they got rid of Willard, they hired basically an unknown coach from Northern Arizona. His name is Ben Howland, and he was coaching the Northern Arizona Lumberjacks, which is just the great logo. He had led that team to a Big Sky Conference championship and an NCAA tournament appearances. This is one of those conferences where if you win the conference, your reward is to become the 16th seed and lose to, I think they were a 15 seed, but they lost to a number 2 or number 1 seed. Howland, when he comes from Northern Arizona to Pitt, he brings some guy named Jamie Dixon, who we would get to know much later. And in 2001, probably more importantly, they hire a assistant coach named Barry Rorson. Barry Rorson is very important to the Pitt program because he started this whole New York to Pittsburgh recruiting pipeline, and that would go on to exist for many years and proved to be very successful for Pitt and for the student athletes from New York that came to Pittsburgh. So Howland, in his second year at Pitt, he actually makes it to the Big East championship game for the first time in school history. and Pitt loses to BC in that championship game. So they don't make the NCAA tournament. The only way they could have made the tournament that year was by winning the Big East championship game, because they had kind of, I think they were like 15-14 or something in the regular season. They didn't have enough wins in the regular season. But even though Pitt misses the the NCAA tournament, they do get invited to the NIT tournament, but they lose to Mississippi State in the second round. The next season, Pitt does even better. Just, they're progressively getting better. As you can see, they make another Big East championship game appearance, and they have this epic game against UConn, and Pitt eventually loses in double overtime. And we'll probably at a later time have to, we could do probably a whole podcast just on that Big East championship game. There was a lot of twists and turns to that one. It's probably one of the more classic Big East championship games in the Big East history.
And they had a few of those with UConn. That was just kind of the first.
It becomes a rivalry. Yeah, it really does. So Pitt does make the tournament as a 3 seed that year. Pitt loses to 10th seeded Kent State and Antonio Gates of San Diego Chargers tight end fame in the Sweet 16, which was kind of a letdown because that's probably one of those games they probably should have won. But it's kind of disappointing. But heading into the 2002, 2003, so they kind of have at the end of that season, they have some disappointing losses. So heading into the 2002, 2003 season, Pitt has a bunch of players back. So just to review, so we remember everybody who's playing, and I'm sure these names will bring back lots of memories for people that, were Pitt fans back then. And hopefully still, although it's tough to watch the team after reviewing this, it's tough to watch the team now. Brandon Knight, he's a gritty point guard. He played hurt the year before. He's a leader of the team. He's more of an assist guy rather than a shooter. And he is the all-time leader in assists at Pitt with 785. His number 20 jersey is retired at Pitt. Julius Page, he's an athletic shooting guard. He's known more for his defensive play than his offensive play, although he does finish his career with 1,512 points, ranking him 17th in Pitt history, even though he was considered more of a defense guy. Jerron Brown, he was actually a Paul Evans recruit. So he was, Ralph Willard recruit, actually. Yes. So he was the previous coaching staff's recruit, but he hung in there with the new coach, and he was considered a key part of the turnaround that has happened in the last few seasons. He's a good defensive player, and he scores points, big points. Ontario Lett was their big man. He played forward. This is probably my favorite player. He was like 6'6". He was more of a rebounder, not the greatest defender in the world, but he was tough on the boards. Definitely. I don't know why I enjoyed watching him play. But he was always a lot of fun. They had a gentleman from overseas named Donatas Zavatkis, and he's a 3-point shooter. He played powered forward and was a hard worker and hustled too. He has 1,099 points for his college career, and his free throw percentage is still 5th all time in Pitt history. So kind of the personality of this team, which is kind of different for basketball, but it worked in the Big East, was they play a tough man-to-man defense with rebounding and an efficient offense. They really are a defense first team, which is in basketball is kind of, unheard of. And it's also kind of ironic because when they're in Northern Arizona, Howland and Dixon had the mantra of recruit to shoot, where it was more all about offense. So that's kind of like the sign of good coaching, that you can adjust to, whatever, situation you kind of find yourself in with the talent. So, kind of a good sign for Pitt and Dixon and Howland.
Hey, Steve, I think that that team, so it's funny when you go through the starters, because until you went through the starters, I didn't remember just how into that team I was. I remember all 5 of those guys. And it was really exciting for any of us that had watched Pitt basketball before, because like literally that was the first time, not just like in our lifetime, but probably in the history of the program where they actually had a top tier team. I mean, up to that point, probably the most significant moment in Pitt basketball history was Jerome Lane breaking the backboard, which just was like, look cool, but it wasn't really like,
Yeah.
it didn't really win them anything.
Well,
And like,
they lost to Barry Gein in the '80s, and I think that was Vanderbilt, or yeah. But yeah, I'm
yeah,
sorry to
they,
interrupt.
no, that they just, you're right though. They didn't have any, even when they had decent teams, they never really went deep into tournaments. They were like ninth seed or something like that. You never, no one expected anything of them. And this was the first time now, like they were a 3 seed in that O2 tournament. And that was a pretty bad upset with Kent State. They were, but still like they were like a good team. It was just really interesting and odd to see that.
Yeah, it was definitely like this is definitely probably this era is the most successful era of Pitt basketball. Like I don't even I mean it's not we can get into that more at the end, but so kind of the key players and two players that I don't mention, but they will get mentioned more throughout the podcast are two off the bench guys who really end up Siobhan Troutman, who was from Williamsburg. And he was like a gritty, small forward kind of guy. And him and Zavatkis kind of jockeyed for playing time throughout the whole season. And that'll kind of come into play later in the tournament. And also, there's a guy who I liked him, but not a lot of other people was Carl Krauser. And he's kind of what should I say, the antithesis of Brandon Knight. He's not, I wouldn't call him a selfish player. He just has a different style. He's more of a drive to the basket shoot guy than a distributor, whereas Brandon Knight is kind of the orchestrator and he can shoot, but he prefers to like create a shot or find the open guy. And he's more of probably a little better of a team leader than Krauser. So, but that's kind of I would say the seven big personalities on that team. So
And
going in,
we talked about Krauser in a previous episode. I think when we talked about him in our most reviled episode,
yeah, yeah.
and I kind of made my feelings known then. And I know Steve, you liked him more than I did. He just, I said at the time, he just had this very punchable face that when something would go wrong, he would just make this like boo boo face, and it just, you're right. Brandon Knight was more of like a mature leader, but Krauser was probably, I don't want to say more talented, but like more athletic, probably a better overall scorer.
I would compare it to not that these guys were at this athletic skill, but I would compare it to like if you want to compare Isaiah Thomas to like Michael Jordan, or Magic Johnson to Michael Jordan, they were more of a passer and a distributor. That would be Thomas or Johnson, where Jordan was like, I'm going to take a shot.
Yeah, that's a
So,
good comp.
yeah. Not that either of those guys are in the same conversation as those players. They're way better. Yeah. But
You said Carl Krauser's as good as Michael Jordan.
yeah, really. Yeah. Well, maybe you could wear the same type of shoes. But going into the regular season, the Big East was absolutely loaded at this time. So it's interesting. The favorites going into the season are UConn, who returned some guy named Ben Gordon and Emeka Okafor. The Big East was also set up like in two divisions, which is kind of odd now. I guess they really don't do that in basketball anymore that I know of. Like it seems like they just throw everybody in one division anymore. But they were picked to win their East Division, and Pitt was picked to win the West Division, with Georgetown and Syracuse receiving some votes to finish in the top spot in that West Division. Pitt had all five of its starters from the year before and was a consensus preseason top 5 ranking. Syracuse had some guy named Carmelo Anthony. I wonder whatever happened to whatever happened to him. Notre Dame, they lost their inside big man, but they are considered to be more of an outside shooting team. And Mike Bray is in his head coach of coaching, his 4th year of being a head coach at Notre Dame in 2003. So it just for reference, in 2021, Mike Bray is still the head coach of Notre Dame basketball. So Mike Bray's been there just for a little bit, which is like in basketball. I guess in college basketball, that isn't that unusual. Um, Another great thing is Pitt finally, they were in the Fitzgerald Fieldhouse, which was kind of like, I don't know, our high school gym probably rivaled the Fitzgerald Fieldhouse. The Palumbo Center was better. Yeah, there were a lot of places that were really better than the Fieldhouse. So they blew up Pitt Stadium and they built the Peterson Event Center, which is like was a big improvement over the Fieldhouse. Pitt cruises through its early season of out of conference schedule. They beat Penn State, Duquesne, and Robert Morris. Remember when they used to play all those teams out of conference every year?
Yeah, so long ago.
Yeah. They beat Ohio State at the Pete by 20 points, and I think Ohio State was ranked at that time. Pitt wins its first 9 games by an average of 26 points. The only real like hiccup is they have a 10-point loss on the road to Georgia. Pitt was ranked second at the time, and that win probably would have had them ranked number 1. But a loss in December, it's not the end of the world in college basketball. Even Hallen said it really wasn't that big of a deal after the game. Although it would have been Pitt's first number 1 ranking in basketball ever, but
Well, it's a Pitt athletic team, so they have to lose. They shouldn't lose to when they're, on the precipice of something big. I mean, that's just a rule, I think.
True. Even in basketball, I guess, yes. Pitt does beat a ranked Notre Dame team that was 12-1 coming in, and they beat 3 other top-ranked team by 3 other top-ranked teams. Pitt wins that Notre Dame, I guess, by 55-72. So Pitt is still ranked in the top 5. So they rebound after that Georgia loss by beating Notre Dame, ranked at home. That was at the Peterson Event Center. After wins against Rutgers and WVU, Pitt plays Syracuse. Pitt beats Syracuse 60-73 at the Peterson Event Center. It makes Pitt 4-0 in the Big East, and that's the first time ever they've been 4-0 in the Big East. So Pitt plays a lot of the game with Brandon Knight hurt, and this is where Siobhan Troutman really comes into play. He comes off the bench and scores 23 points, and Jerron Brown holds Carmelo Anthony scoreless for long periods of the game. So that's kind of like a big deal. Like if Jerron Brown is shutting down like, an NBA player, that's, of course we didn't know that at the time. Carmelo Anthony kind of hadn't, become who, he was yet. Of course, Jim Boeheim, everybody's favorite coach, complains about Pitt playing physical defense. A lot of coaches, like I have a lot of fun quotes by opposing coaches where like they're complaining, but they're trying to do it in a way so they won't get in trouble. So this is like, them working the officials. They're physical. This is a quote by Boeheim after this first game. They're physical and they know when to be physical. They ride you a little bit and they give you a push at the right times and in the right places. So I'm not sure if Jim Boeheim was describing Pitt's defense or his love life, but hey, whatever works for Jimmy B there. Some of it could be called, some of it isn't. It's a tough team to referee. They're like Georgetown used to be. They get away with some, but that's just part of good team defense. See how he kind of couched it?
Yeah, I love the backhanded, and then just to take a swipe at John Thompson too, just for like no reason. That's classic Big East coach speak there.
And I don't think Thompson was at Georgetown by that point. I'm not
well,
sure.
but he's referencing what Georgetown used to be.
I think his son might have been there I
think
you're
right.
Yeah. So speaking of Georgetown, they get to play Georgetown. And in an old school hard fouling contest, Pitt beats Georgetown on a foul shot by Julius Page with 0.4 seconds left. I remember watching this game. I think I was like at an ice skating rink. I took my kids ice skating and I was sitting like watching, they had like the TV. This is how popular Pitt basketball, like they actually had the game on in like the main viewing area, It's like that would, never happen. But I remember like when they had that 1 point lead, you're like, okay, miss this foul shot, And he actually did. It worked out perfect. He missed a foul shot, and so they couldn't throw the ball down the court. Um, just to show like how crazy, like this game was like basically a football game played in with basketball hoops, basically. 6 players fouled out between the two teams. 6 players. So that's what is that? 5 fouls. So that's 30 fouls just right there. Like that's crazy. So both teams were definitely in the double bonus in this one. They win 64-65 and Pitt is 11-0 at home. And that's a big win. So that's another big win in the Big East. So here's another game that I know Tim loves. Pitt has a rematch in the Carrier Dome with Syracuse, and they are ranked 24th. And this is actually in front of a crowd of 30,000. It was the largest crowd. It was the largest in the country to see a basketball that season. 30,000 people came to see a regular season basketball game. That's impressive. Pitt led by 13 points at the beginning of the second half, but the Orange surged late in the game, and on 2 free throws by bench player Jeremy McNeil, who was 26% from the free throw line, he tied the game with 46 seconds later. Jerry McNamara, who would be just an absolute thorn in Pitt's side, he drove to the hoop and threw up a left-handed shot, and it was tipped in by McNeil. So this guy who's like this bench player ends up being this big hero. Carl Krauser fumbled away an inbound pass, and the crowd thought the game was over, but the refs reviewed it and gave Pitt like 0.8 seconds. And Jerron Brown sent a pass to Brandon Knight, and he was really way out there. He sent a desperation heave that did go in, but the officials had to review it, and it did go in after the clock had expired. So, and the crowd had actually rushed the court like 3 different times because like they thought they'd won the game. And the funny part of this game is Jim Boeheim like had to pull like a Sam Weish, like he had to get on the microphone and say, "Get off the court. We got to figure out who won the game." And yeah, it was pretty crazy scene at the Carrier Dome.
I remember watching that game, and once again, when they blow up the Carrier Dome, I want to pull the one that
you're going to put in for that privilege.
Yes, to push the little plunger down.
I mean, I don't even know who they would get to do that if they do that. Like Ernie Davis is gone. Like, well, Ernie Davis has been gone a while, but like, who was the big tight end? John Mackey, and stuff like.
Well, I don't
Jim
know.
Brown. Jim Brown's still around. That's probably who they would have do it. Would be.
Yeah,
Jim
maybe.
Brown.
But he's pretty old and frail. I think I could do a better job. Just saying, and like it typically when they do that, they'll have like trying to remember like when they blew up the River Stadium, I thought they had like a fan contest, like you could enter and you could be the one that pushes the thing.
Yeah, you never know which way it's gonna go. Maybe they'll just have the little orange guy do it, whatever he is, or it is. I guess it's not gender specific now. No, but we're so politically correct here on the
yes
the Pittsburgh Sports Memories. But Carmelo Anthony actually had 14 points and 13 rebounds, a double-double, his 11th of the season. And Pitt missed out again on getting a number 1 ranking for the second time this season. I don't think he really complained too much about this loss, like a close loss on the road, like in front of 30,000 people. That's going to happen in basketball. It wasn't great. And it did kind of, no, I don't think it did really end up hurting Pitt besides losing the number 1 ranking and probably a number 1 seed in the tournament. If they win this game, maybe they get a number 1 seed. Pitt rebounds and beats Providence at home. The Providence coach complains the officials aren't calling enough fouls against Pitt. Are you sensing a theme here? Pitt plays Notre Dame in South Bend, so another tough road game. And I think Pitt is ranked 10th, and it's almost a replay of the Syracuse game. Notre Dame point guard Chris Thomas finds Torrin Francis for a basket with like 0.6 seconds left in the game. Pitt missed a couple of 3-pointers. I remember Ontario Led had a wide, like not a wide, but a pretty good shot inside the lane from like 3 or 4 feet away that he missed. Brandon Knight hit his only 3 of the game to tie the game with less than 32 seconds left. And I think Pitt like said something to that guy like, "Oh yeah, this is how it should be," when he tied it, and like then the point guard for Notre Dame was like, "Yeah, right," and like made that sweet pass that won them the game. So also, like, I forgot how good Big East basketball was way back when. This is like 2 absolute 5-star matchups, 2 weekends in a row. What an amazing like conference and time that was.
It really was. And Steve, as you've talked about in previous episodes, that doesn't matter. It's not football. And so that all had to be broken up for the sake of football.
It really is a shame because it was a lot of fun to watch, and wow. I mean, winter weekend, Saturday nights in the middle of February were really exciting. Now it's like, yeah, what's on? Pitt's playing Georgia Tech. Who cares?
True.
So once again, they have a pretty good big. They get back to their winning ways with a 46-82 win at the Pete. Donatas Savakis had 15 points. Siobhan Troutman had another good game. They lose to Seton Hall, this is probably another this kind of chalk this up and not a great win. Although Seton Hall wasn't bad, but Seton Hall was a decent team. They lose them 61-73 in East Rutherford, New Jersey. I think the Pitt kind of overlooked Seton Hall, but Seton Hall had upset Notre Dame the game before. Pitt shot 4 of 26 from 3-point land, so they're nearly like Donatas outside of Zavodkas, they really don't have like a really good 3-point shooter. And Pitt never won in that Continental Airlines arena. I don't think the Penguins really did well there either. So thank God all those teams moved out of there. I looked it up; it does still exist, but and the Devils haven't been there since 2007. The Nets haven't been there since a couple years later. So thank goodness nobody uses whatever the name of that arena. I think it's like Izod Arena or something. I don't know. Thank God that's gone. That's up there with the Carrier Dome. But after that, Pitt kind of like gathers itself and they go on a major win streak and they cruise the wins over Georgetown, Rutgers, and Virginia Tech. Pitt plays UConn, which is now this has become a major rivalry. Pitt is ranked 8th, and UConn is not ranked, but they do have 19 wins and 9 conference wins. So UConn definitely needs this game to like set themselves up to make the tournament. UConn had a 13-point lead in the first half, but Julius Page scored 11 straight points in the second half. Ben Gordon and Rashad Anderson both missed late threes in the game. Howland had a great quote. "My heart dropped when Anderson took that 3 from the wing. Talk about watching your life flash in front of your eyes." And Coach Calhoun said Pitt made up their minds they were going to win. UConn coach Jim Calhoun said. It was a great win by Pitt over a big-time rivalry and a good team. Seton Hall comes to the Peterson Event Center. There's no New Jersey or Continental Airlines to save you this time, Seton Hall. So they win 54-86. And this secured Pitt a bye in the first round of the Big East tournament. And they actually ended Seton Hall's 9-game win streak. So Seton Hall had been on quite a little tear themselves. And that also makes them undefeated at home. They go the whole first season at the Peterson Event Center 16-0, which is just, I think that's pretty unheard of outside of like Duke or like North Carolina. Like to not lose a game at home in a season is pretty impressive. For the last game of the season, Pitt plays Villanova in Philadelphia. For some reason, Villanova had only 7 players for the game. There was some sort of I vaguely remember this scandal. It was like about phone calls or something weird. It was like I don't know why that was illegal by the NCAA, but I don't know if they were calling QVC and ordering Snuggies or something. I don't know what the Villanova players were doing and why those phone calls were illegal, but They were illegal. So, and Jay Wright, talk about another coach who's been at a school for absolutely ever. Jay Wright was the coach at Villanova in 2003. So, I mean, Pitt leads the whole way, and I think this was in the Wells Fargo Center. I'm pretty sure it wasn't on Villanova's campus. But be that as it may, Villanova plays tough, but Pitt leads the whole way, and they almost lose at the end. Brandon Knight misses 5 free throws to put the game away. Curtis Sumter, who would become a really good player for Villanova, misses a shot late, but Pitt hangs on to win a 56-54. And Villanova is just always tough to beat, especially in Philadelphia. It's just hard to come out of there with a win, no matter where they're playing. Spectrum, Wells Fargo Center, I don't know, in front of the Rocky statue. I don't know. It's just tough to beat Villanova. And Ben Howland had a good quote. He said, "I knew it would be tough. An adverse situation will probably inspire them." He's talking about Villanova. "Everything they did, we expected. We made some mistakes, got a little cute, and it backfired." But Pitt does win. They have their first round Big East bye, so it's on to the Big East tournament. So Pitt finishes the season with a 13-3 record in the Big East Conference. Pitt gets the second seed in the Big East tournament due to that loss to Syracuse. And the joke used to be like when Pitt would make the tournament was come for the first game, and after Pitt loses, stay for the weekend in New York City. I remember Bill Hillgrove saying that. But this is not your your grandfather's Pitt basketball team. So, and a part of it is like you got to remember these players are mainly like Brandon Knight's from New York. I know Jerron Brown's from like Kentucky, but Brandon Knight's from New York, and I don't know if Page. I don't think Page is from New York too, but they had a lot of New York players, and they really enjoyed playing in Madison Square Garden. It was a big thing to them. So no matter, Pitt goes on an absolute tear in the tournament. They beat Providence by 10, 67-57, and they totally kill Boston College 74-48. And it sets up a showdown with now their big rival UConn for the second year in a row in the Big East Conference Championship game. It's Pitt's third consecutive trip to the championship game, which is pretty impressive. And Brandon Knight had been hurt in the Boston College game, and he played on a bad ankle. And at the half, it was a close game. Pitt was up by a point. But then in the second half, Pitt's defense took over and held UConn to just 21 points. Pitt hit their free throws in the second half, going 14-18. Jerron Brown had a great game. He had a career high of 19 points and 10 rebounds. One of the memorable moments was UConn. You know how like teams will do that. Oh, I'm going to roll the ball down the court to save time. Well, like Brandon Knight like dove and stole the ball and called timeout, and it was like totally ruined that strategy by UConn. So that was a great. It was just like an example of like Pitt being gritty and playing good defense, and it was just kind of just how that Pitt team was. Very like tough nose and hard mind. They won 74-56 for their first Big East championship in school history in basketball. And I think that was pre-2004. So it was their first Big East championship, at least in basketball and football. I don't know if they won it in, any of the other sports, but in the two major sports, that was their first Big East championship. Calhoun, after the game, Jim Calhoun said they were a tougher team and they wore us down with their mental toughness. They held us to 19 points in the second half and won the game with defense and by doing a terrific job of controlling their own offense and defense. And this is what impressed me the most is Julius Page is picked MVP of the Big East tournament. And he's picked this over Ben Gordon and Carmelo Anthony, who go on to have, I would say, pretty successful NBA careers. So it's really an impressive showing by Pitt. So on the it's a great win, first time ever. Pitt's like, the team was really happy. They really wanted to win that Big East tournament. So Pitt gets a second seed in the tournament, and they are sent to Boston to play Wagner, depending in the first round matchup. They dispatch Wagner. Now I'm saying it all silly. Wagner's 61 to 87. The coach from Wagner still complains. It's Derek Wittenberg. They hit you every play, which is legal. They bump you, they chuck you, they do it consistently. But I guess he didn't have because Derek Whitner was the guy from NC State,
Right. He's the one that
threw the shot.
threw the shot, but it was
Yeah.
Lorenzo Charles that
Yeah,
that put it in. Yeah.
yeah. So I guess there was no Lorenzo Charles to bail him out. Ben Howland says defense is what wins championships, and it's what's going to win in this tournament. Howland said our team is very unselfish, which they were. When they were get down inside the paint, they weren't afraid to pass the ball around. So it was a pretty fun team to watch. Like, it was just a fun team to watch, and they were a very good college team. The win sets up a showdown with Indiana. In I don't know, like Indiana, like do you consider them a traditional basketball power, Tim? I mean, they're not Duke or North Carolina or UCLA.
They
but,
were under Bobby Knight. I mean,
yeah.
And he had been unceremoniously fired. Was it the year before?
Well, the year before they had made the Final Four under a guy named Tom Crean, who's still coaching somewhere. Or no, they had made the championship game. That was it. Yes, because and they were still considered like basketball royalty. I would say they're at least in the same air of like Syracuse, UConn, like those kind of schools. Maybe they're not like a UCLA, North Carolina, Duke, like those kind of, that blue blood, but they're still, they are always considered a very good team.
Well, they had won, I believe it was 3 titles under Bob Knight. So, I mean, that was, that was at the time, that was as many as like Mike Krzyzewski had won at Duke. Right.
Yeah.
So that was pretty big. And then, but he had like, and the way they fired him was kind of ridiculous.
Well, they were because I think they were looking for a reason.
They were looking for a reason, and they weren't as good at that point. They were like they had sort of come back at this point, but like a few years earlier they weren't as good. And then he like shoved a kid on campus or something, or I forget.
He yelled at the kid like he held a door or something, and he said, "Don't call me." He said, "Okay, Knight," or something like that. Or Bob.
Yeah, the kid was disrespectful to him, and Bob Knight yelled at him. And it was like, oh my gosh, he's done so many worse things than that. And you kept him on. It was just like that's the straw that broke the camel's back. Sorry, coach. Also, we're 7-14 right now. I mean, that has nothing to do with it, of course. And then there was, like you said, Pitt would have played them the year before in the Elite Eight because they had upset Duke in the Sweet 16, and then they would have played Pitt had Pitt not lost to the Antonio Gates School. I can't remember. Kent State, yes. Yeah. And
I forget they had Kent State had some I don't know how to describe, some white point guard that couldn't jump but 2 inches off the ground, but he was okay, but it really wasn't. I don't know.
So that there was a lot of controversy because that coach for Indiana took them to the Final Four,
and then he left.
Well, and people are like, well, that's Bobby Knight's team. And, so it was a weird time for Indiana basketball because they were good, but then was it because that's the team that Bobby Knight recruited or, so that's what I remember about
But this
Indiana,
guy, Tom,
era.
I think it's Tom Coverdale, who was really good offensive player. And him and a couple, I think, other guys that carried them to that championship game where they lost to Maryland, because Maryland was really good the year under who was the coach? Gary something. I can't remember the guy's last name, but
Maryland's problem was they couldn't ever get past Duke and Carolina, and
then once Duke was gone,
then they finally broke through. So I mean, Indiana was kind of a Cinderella team the year before, and now they're coming in as what you said, a 7 seed to play Pitt.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is, Pitt totally shuts down Indiana, and that Coverdale is a very good offensive player. They hold them scoreless for 6 minutes in the first half, and they force them to commit 5 turnovers in that stretch. And Pitt wins pretty easily, 52-74. And Jerron Brown scores 20 points. Brandon Knight has 17 points and 7 assists. Julius Page holds Tom Coverdale to 6 points on 7 shots. That's really good defense. I mean, so Page like totally took out their best player. And Coverdale said after the game, this is Indiana's probably one of their best players. He's probably the best defender I've faced in my whole career. I knew he was a good defender, but I didn't realize he was that quick and athletic. He sees what's going to happen before it happens. No one, not, and this is the coach from Indiana, who was Mike Davis. Not one guy over there cares who scores. That's the point we've got to get back to as a team, said Indiana coach Mike Davis. And who blistered his players for being selfish and listening to outside influences telling them how good they are. So that's kind of what happened, I think, in Indiana. They made the championship game the year before, and they kind of read their own press clippings, instead of like realizing they're kind of a Cinderella team and, needed to focus on improving themselves.
And Steve, you
But
talked about Julius Page having a really good game and how he was also the MVP of the Big East tournament. He probably has to go down as one of the most underrated players in Pittsburgh sports history, wouldn't you think, like in any sport,
well,
in terms of
it's just because he's a defensive
right.
basketball player, and it's like that doesn't get you press clippings. It does
No.
like holding Tom Coverdale to that kind of output is like unbelievable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It was not a glorious job that he did, but he did it so well. And those Pitt teams aren't those Pitt teams, I think, without Julius Page.
for sure, yeah. And see, and then here's a good Howland quote. He calls it Pittsburgh Steelers basketball. And that's really was it. Howland called Pitt style of play. We're not tall, we're burly. We want kids that are tough. That's what wins. And with that win, his fourth, and you for Howland's only been to the NCAA tournament now twice, 2 years in a row, right? He has the most tournament wins in Pitt history, in Pitt basketball history. That's how bad they were before Ben Howland showed up. So, I mean, as much as we criticize Steve Peterson, that was a Peterson hire, I do believe. He really he knocked this one out of the park with Ben Howland. So Pitt is on to the Sweet 16 for the second year in a row. They have an 11-game winning streak. They're red hot. They are blowing teams out. These games haven't been close, but they're going to face the third-seeded Marquette in Minneapolis. I don't know. You know who Marquette has this guy who played for them, and I don't think if anybody really. I don't know whatever happened to him. This Dwayne Wade guy. I don't know. I wonder how his career went after this. But and you know what? Tom Crean was the coach at Marquette. I misspoke when I called him the coach at Indiana. And Tom Crean, he was an assistant coach at Pitt from 94 to 95. And he was friends with the previous coach, Ralph Willard. So Tom Crean was the coach at Marquette, not at Indiana the year before. So my bad. I'm sorry, all you Indiana fans. He was friends with Ralph Willard. Marquette had a record of 23-5. They have another guy. I'll get to the guy's name that is kind of their point guard, and it leads to something interesting. So, Vern Lundquist and Bill Rafferty have the call on CBS. And this could this be Pitt's one shining moment? One shining moment. Yeah, there we go. Everybody wanted to hear me sing. So Pitt starts the game, and here's where it kind of gets interesting. There's an interesting, like, I would say, I don't know, the coaching decision by Ben Howland. He has Julius Page guard Travis Diener, who's their point guard, and not Dwayne Wade. And so Dwayne Wade is being guarded by Jerron Brown. And I guess Dwayne Wade had, guarded Carmelo Anthony earlier in the year, but, Carmelo Anthony kind of had a good game, that one against Syracuse. So why in Howland's logic, according to Rafferty and Lundquist, was that Travis Diener was kind of the straw that stirs the drink for Marquette. And if they could shut him down, their offense as a whole, I guess, wouldn't be effective, and that they were counting on Dwayne Wade not being, I guess, not talent, but not beating them by himself. So that would end up kind of coming back to bite him. Pitt starts off the game missing its first 5 shots, and a couple of those shots were those inside shots. And I just remember they always miss those. It was kind of annoying with this Pitt team. They would just like, oh my goodness, just like all the time, just miss like these little like I don't know. My grandfather used to call them peep shots. You know, there's inside like yeah they're contested, but you got to hit those. You know, Marquette gets the first basket by Dwayne Wade, and it's almost 2 minutes into the game. The game goes 2 minutes without a basket. Donatas Savakis has 2 nice basket, 1 for 2 and 1 for 3, and Pitt has an 8-2 lead. There was one like I think Savakis like starts to get fired up because like he thought it was a 3, I think, but the refs thought he had his foot on the line. So I think Zavakis was just really fired up for this game, and that's gonna kind of come into play later in the game.
Yes.
Dwayne Wade fouls Zavakis, and he gets a little fired up. It was on a rebound. Halfway through the first half, Pitt is up 15-8 and has some backups playing like Carl Krauser and Siobhan Troutman. Troutman has been a great 6th man off the bench the whole season, but Marquette goes on a 5-0 run, which ends with a dunk by Torrey Morris by Pitt. If anybody remembers Torrey Morris, who's kind of a little used big man. And Torrey Morris gets a send it in by Bill Rafferty. So, but no backboards were hurt in the recording of this bad podcast, even though Bill Rafferty gave us a send it in.
Yes.
The score, it's 16-21 Pitt with 6 minutes to go. Todd Townsend is a bench player for Marquette. He hits 2 threes in a row, and Marquette now has the lead 22-21. Diener and Wade really aren't a factor so far in this game. Robert Jackson has 5 points for Marquette. The secondary players really keep like Marquette in the game, and I think too like Pitt could have really established like a big early lead, you know, and put Marquette in a hole, and that kind of hurt too. Marquette hits some more 3-pointers. Troutman for Pitt has some inside baskets. The team finished the half tied at 34. So Travis Diener and Dwayne Wade only have 2 points in the first half. So they are like, at least in the first half, it like the strategy is being effective. They are shutting down Diener and Wade, but at the same time, even while doing that, you're still tied with Marquette. So that's kind of like maybe a little ominous. Troutman has 8 points for Pitt, followed by 4 other players with 5 points each. In the second half, Marquette big man Robert Jackson continues to play well. Marquette builds a 3-point lead, 43-40 with 16 minutes left. And this is kind of where Dwayne Wade breaks loose. Dwayne Wade basically takes over, and he starts scoring at will on both Brandon Knight and like Julius Page. Like by the time Page like kind of started guarding him, he always like already had gotten hot. Pitt tried to put Jerron Brown on him. He scored on him too. So Dwayne Wade scores the last 10 points that Marquette has scored, and they now lead 51-44. Marquette hits another 3. They're on fire from 3-point land. Knight answers with a bucket. And this is where like I think like Pitt maybe starts to see it slipping away. Zavakis throws some wild elbows. I mean, like he's like literally going to take somebody's head off. Like the crowd like kind of goes, whoa. And like Vern Lundquist said he felt the wind from his and Rafferty remarks that he cleared out the photographers in the front row. Here's another iconic moment. Dwayne Wade like drives the lane, and Jerron Brown like basically tackles him, but Wade throws up this like underhanded shot that goes in anyway. So at this point, Dwayne Wade is like broken loose, and Pitt has no answer. Some nice interior passing by Pitt. They cut the lead to 60-54. That's been kind of their trademark, and there's still 8 minutes left. With 8 minutes left, Donatas Savakis, and they really could have used a 3-point shooter like late in this game. He takes off his shoes and leaves the bench area. Both Howland and Barry Rorson try to talk to him. And at that point, you know, he took his shoes off, Howland said, and that was it. There seemed to be some rivalry with him and Troutman. Like, I guess he got mad that Troutman was starting to eat away at his minutes, but Troutman would go on to be a really good player and was a really good player the whole year. And he just, I guess he couldn't accept his role at that point, which was kind of like anti to like most of the players on that team, like were, had kind of accepted their role, but Zavakis definitely, hurt himself and the team by pouting here in the second half of this game.
Is it bad that I mean, that's not all I remember of Donatas Savakis, but anytime you would raise his name, that literally would be the first thing I would think of as him taking his shoes off.
Yeah, and he was a really good player, and he was a tough, gritty player. He's the type of player that fitted on that team. He just like sometimes like Troutman was really good, and I don't know, maybe he thought Troutman should have subbed in for Let, but that really wasn't Troutman's position. Let was more of the center, where Troutman was always a small forward. It's just Troutman was a better inside presence, and it was kind of like one of those weird, like Zavakis was like one of those small forwards, like Sumter or like Pittsnoggle, where he could jump out and he could post up, but he was really good at jumping out and hitting threes and shots, if he could find his spot on the floor. Whereas like he just was a little different player than Troutman. And I don't know what to tell you there. I wish he wouldn't have done it. I mean, it definitely ends up hurting Pitt down the stretch here, but maybe he wishes he wouldn't have too.
Probably.
Yeah. Um let's see. Wade smokes Knight again. Marquette leads 67-59 with about 5:20 to go. Krauser's in. He turns the ball over and like badly. Dwayne Wade dunks it home. Krauser is a freshman and still young, so but I think he kind of like starts to melt down a little bit too. So Pitt gets Krauser off the ball, and they put Brandon Knight, the real leader of the team, back, and Knight spurs a comeback. So Pitt now goes on an 11-1 run to get back in the game after they trailed 71-59. Knight makes a nice pass to Troutman, and it's 71-68 with 2 minutes to go. They finally make a defensive stop on a missed shot by Wade. And another nice pass from Knight to Troutman. It's now 71-70 with a minute 18 left. Marquette gets fouled on the next possession and hits their foul shots, and it's now 73-70. But Brandon Knight has a sweet dribble drive, and he puts one in for 73-72. One of the few times he didn't, pass. He could drive too, but he was more of a passer. But that was definitely a big bucket. But Wade answers right back with a nice shot. This is probably the biggest shot of the game because it really put the game away. And it's 75-72 with 21 seconds to go. And with no Zavatkis, Pitt's best three-pointer, Pitt has to opt to go for two. They get a foul. Knight gets fouled. He hits both his free throws, but it's still 75-74 Marquette. Marquette inbounds the ball, and they get loose, and they kind of run around and run some time off, and they get fouled, but they hit their foul shots. It's 77-74. Brandon Knight misses a three-point shot after some other missed Marquette foul shots to really put the game. A wild shot by Krauser from like half court, and the game ends. Pitt loses to a pretty good Marquette team, 77-74. Brandon Knight finishes with 17 points and 11 assists. Drawn Brown has 14 points. Chevy Troutman finishes with 15 points. Page has 12 points, and he does shut down Travis Diener, but the problem is Dwayne Wade finishes with 22 points and 4 assists. I mean, Diener finished with 4 points and 8 assists, but the way I think not being able to shut down Dwayne Wade and the other backups killed them. Marquette would go on to upset Kentucky in the Elite Eight, but they lost to Kansas in the Final Four. Whatever did happen to that Dwayne Wade guy, he would go on to become an NBA superstar. He would win multiple championships. Miami with some guy named LeBron. Syracuse won the national championship that year. That was Boeheim's first, with Carmelo Anthony leading the way, a team that Pitt had beaten. So
Was that Boeheim's only championship? I believe it is.
I think so, yeah. Because speaking of Bobby Knight, that was the Keith Smart game. That
Right.
was
They lost that game. Yeah. Yeah, that's hard to believe. I mean, he's been coaching them since I want to say like 1937 maybe.
He was there when Pitt went to the Final Four back.
Right. Yeah, that's who beat them that year was Jim Boeheim. Steve, do you think if they so Brandon Knight really like you said, he kind of like he carried the team on his back and they almost came back. Do you think if they come back and win that game, you mentioned how they had beaten Syracuse. Do you think they get past Kentucky and Kansas and Syracuse? Because that would have been the next three opponents.
I don't remember who played for Kentucky and Kansas, but here, we'll put a bow on it here. Here's what I'll let me put a bow on it and then I'll finish with my thoughts, because I think after watching Pitt, because I kind of got really into Pitt basketball at this time, and I think what happened to Pitt is just kind of what wins in the tournament and what doesn't win in the tournament, and that's where I'll go with this. So Pitt finishes the season 28-5. They go undefeated, 16-0 at the Peterson Event Center. They win their first Big East championship. They make the Sweet 16 for the second year in a row. And although it's a disappointing loss, I don't think it's like as bad a loss as the one to Kent State. Brandon Knight, Jerron Brown, and Ontario Lett leave as the winningest class in Pitt basketball history. And this is where things, unfortunately, after the season ends, Ben Howland leaves for some sweet Adidas money at UCLA. UCLA just offered so much money, and they bought out his contract like it was nothing because they're UCLA and they just have money to burn. According to Chuck Finder, Ben Howland, now this is Chuck Finder, and I don't believe this for a minute. Ben Howland made less money, and Ben Howland said this too. He made less money at UCLA than Pitt. They said Pitt was offering 1.3 mil, and UCLA offered 900K plus incentives. I'm sure those incentives were guaranteed and were way more than that $1.3 million.
Was Howland he's
from
UCLA?
He's from LA. I
Okay.
forget what part, but he's from LA. Howland goes on to UCLA. He gets the 2 straight national championship games, but can't win either, losing to Florida both times. He was actually at UCLA for 10 years till 2013. He went to 3 consecutive Final Fours, won the Pac-10 conference 4 times, but he still gets fired because, imagine if he would have done that at Pitt. He would be like Boeheim or Calhoun. He would have been there as long as you want to be here until you don't want to be here no more.
Well, remember, like 2003, it was a few years removed from the John Wooden era. It was 30
they
years
had
or
Lavin.
so.
I think Steve Lavin was there.
Yeah, and they had won a championship in the 90s with I think with him, but like UCLA was still. You talked about Indiana being basketball royalty. Like UCLA was still.
Yeah, I would put them above Indiana, like up there with Duke and North Carolina.
Right.
Yeah.
And I don't know if they are really today, but back then they were a lot closer to that John Wooden era than they are today. And they were so desperate. They were so desperate to get back there. And Howland's dream, I think, was to be that guy. He was going to be the John Wooden, to take UCLA back to where they used to be.
He had tried a couple of times to get the UCLA job, and they had turned him down. Like when he was at other schools before he went to Northern Arizona, he had success as an assistant, and he tried to, even be an assistant, and they wouldn't have him. So that's how he ended up at Northern Arizona. Pitt totally lucks out. Actually, they hired Jimmy Dixon, Howland's assistant, and he keeps Barry Rorson, and they have a ton of success. And but that's another. We'll definitely do like Jamie Dixon era. We'll call this the Ben Howland era, but this is definitely the close but no NBA star. Besides Johnny Majors, Ben Howland, he's probably the one of the greatest hires in school history. He totally like created a culture where there really wasn't any. Johnny Majors, at least there had been some winning culture at Pitt football. Their Pitt basketball never had any winning culture, really. I mean, they had Calipari and some other people back in the 80s, but that never really lasted and never really did anything.
Yeah, that's a really good comparison, Steve, because
Yeah.
we did an episode on Johnny Majors and you talked about how the program was almost like extinct at the time, the football program at the time they
Yeah.
hired Johnny Majors in the 70s. And the basketball program wasn't extinct, but it was as close as you could come. I mean, Pitt basketball was so irrelevant. And like they
Well,
not only did they go 16-0 with the Pete became this really exciting place, all the students, and like they never had that in the 80s or 90s. They never had that level of excitement even with the student body. So he
it
really did
became
bring a
a
culture.
yeah, it became a who's who too. Like Mike Tomlin attended the games, and like, yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt. Um, uh, but to follow up on that, like just whatever, yeah, I guess we'll do like the end of the all those movies, like whatever happened to this guy. Um, Brandon Knight played in the NBA D League for a couple years, and then he went on to coaching. He coached at Pitt from 2008 to 2016. He went to Rutgers. He's still at Rutgers as an assistant basketball coach. So I mean, he's had for Jaron Brown. He graduated from Pitt. He never played pro basketball. The only thing I can find about him lately is an article stating he was coaching high school basketball in Kentucky. So Ontario Let, he I remember he was coaching at Pitt in 2015, and he couldn't. I couldn't find anything about him since. I mean, even the Facebook page and stuff, like there weren't many updates and stuff. So I don't know what Ontario Let's up to. Donatas Savakis went on to have a 13-year pro career in Europe. And that's the shame of it, is he really became like a very good pro. In 2016, he was running some European team who I can't pronounce their name. So somewhere in Lithuania, I don't know. I don't think anybody dares take off their shoes at his. I don't know. I don't know what Zonakas Zakis has been doing since 2016. Siobhan Troutman, after a great career at Pitt, he went on to have a 15-year pro career, mostly in Europe. He was last playing in 2018 for a team in Argentina. And here, kind of like, what was the question you asked me? Like, why Pitt never had success, or like what happened? Here's kind of my theory: is Pitt was always a good college team, but they're never able to get over the hump. And in my opinion, just from like after years of watching the tournament and watch Pitt in the tournament, and I kind of really got into the NCAA tournament, is I think there's two things that win in the NCAA tournament. You either have your lottery picks, your one and done lottery pick NBA players that like every time you pass in the ball, it's like tweet, tweet, they get the foul or they just score a bunch of points, like Dwayne Wade or Carmelo Anthony, or, you know, who are the players on that Florida team that went, like Noah and, some of those guys. So if you don't have like one of those players, the other way you can win, like the way the small schools win, like I mean, there was like a Northern Iowa and like American, which I think is, you get like a bunch of little 3-point shooters and they just run around and shoot threes. And that will win you games. And that's a little easier probably to, recruit than, the big NBA one and dones like Calipari, Kentucky does every year. And I think North Carolina does that to some extent, but I mean, I don't know. Does that kind of answer your question there? You'd asked way
Yeah,
like
yeah,
5
yeah. I
minutes
think
ago.
that makes sense. I mean, and this was kind of that era. I mean, Calipari was still maybe was I don't remember where he was at this
I think
point,
of
but
Memphis. With
it,
this might have been before
it
Memphis.
might have been before Memphis, but he definitely made that whole practice famous of like, let's recruit the star player, sell him on, you can play here 1 year and be a star, and then you'll be a lottery pick in the NBA. And like, no matter how good Pitt's defense was, like Dwayne Wade was such a good example. I mean, okay, we have this great defensive team, but eventually somebody's going to crack that because they're just so talented. And then it's tough for you as a defensive minded team to then score a bunch of points to keep up. Like that just wasn't their game.
Well, I think even if they don't score, they get the foul. That's the bigger problem. Is like they're just going to drive in there and like, oh, that's Dwayne Wade. Tweet, that
Yeah.
like that's Carmelo Anthony. Tweet, oh, he missed the shot. And even if it's clean defense, well, Carmelo Anthony's not going to miss that shot. It's a foul. I think the refs go to that mindset. And then, like I said, Pitt never really was of the mind to recruit a bunch of 3-point shooters. I mean, they always had like one guy, like, they had Ramon or Ashton Gibbs or, Zavakis, but they never really had like those other teams I was talking about. I had like 3 or 4 guys, and those guys never played in the NBA either for the most part. But they were, although I guess Butler that one year had that guy. I can't remember it, but it was pretty good. But that's more of the Jamie Dixon era. I really enjoyed watching this team. It was fun, like team of like players that played well together and like complimented and played. They were a tough, gritty team to watch, and they really weren't prima donnas. They kind of fit the city of Pittsburgh well, I think. Well, thanks for tuning in. Hopefully that gets you ready for the March Madness, which will be coming up. Get us out of this winter. What's our website again, Tim?
So the links for our website, our Facebook page, and our Twitter feed are all in the show notes. The website is pittsburghsportsmemories.weebly.com.
All right, thank you much, and thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks, everybody.